Welcome to this week's episode of the SEC Sports Guys. I'm your host, Hunter Ames. I'll be joined momentarily with Mason Donaldson, Lemansky Flakes, and Jason Lee. All SEC teams were in action this weekend. For the first segment, we're just going to run through all of the different games and the happenings in the SEC, starting with Vanderbilt-Wake Forest. Vanderbilt, coming into this game, needed a big win here to become bowl eligible in the season. James Franklin, in his first season as the head coach for the Vanderbilt Commodores, scored
unbelievable support out here tonight, and to think about this team had only won 2 games the year before and the year before that as well. One of only 5 teams ever in the history of the program. Really proud of the kids and my coaches.
Running back Zach Story led the way with 3 rushing touchdowns and 184 yards. Don't want to forget quarterback Jordan Rodgers. I don't know if some of you might not know this. He is the younger brother of Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. He had 139 yards through the air, including a 73-yard touchdown reception, catch and run by wide receiver Brandon Brayton. Rodgers also had 90 on the ground. Vanderbilt cruised to an easy victory in this one, 41-7, knocking off the Demon Deacons, and they will be making an appearance in a bowl game in this postseason. Liberty Bowl officials were on hand for the Tennessee-Kentucky Wildcats matchup this week. They were hoping to maybe persuade Tennessee into coming into the Liberty Bowl this year. Kentucky had other things in mind. They pulled off a 10-7 victory, ending a 26-game skid of losing to the Tennessee Volunteers. Tyler Bray had a pretty decent day. He threw for 215 yards. He had 1 touchdown, but he had 2 interceptions in the game. Matt Rourke on the Wildcat side of the ball on the offense, the quarterback there, he's not much of a passer, but more of a ground runner. He managed to only throw for 15 yards through the air, but relied heavily on his legs, rushing for 124 yards. Running back Koshik Williams had the only touchdown for Kentucky. Both teams will wrap it up. This will be their last game for the season. Both are not going to be playing any extra games in this postseason, and they'll be making improvements and adjustments for next year. Moving into our third game to take a look at, it was the famous Egg Bowl, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Mississippi State becomes bowl eligible in this victory. They cruise to an easy win. Here is Jason Lee with more.
Thank you, Ames. Vic Ballard led the Bulldogs to a big victory over Ole Miss, as you said, 31-3. Ballard had 144 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns to give the Bulldogs that much-needed 6th victory, make them bowl eligible now when the bowls will be announced next week. For Ole Miss, long season. Houston Nutt's resignation 4 weeks ago announced. They end the season 2-10. Houston Nutt ends his career 24-26 for the Rebels. Here's what Dan Mullen has to say about the Bulldogs' victory.
That's a great win. I'm really proud of our guys, the way they battled, the way they fought. To win 3 straight Egg Bowl championships is something pretty special. Really proud since we've gotten here of how everybody's bought into what we're trying to do. You know what? I mean, that's a great for these seniors to go out that way. Great for our young guys. I understand how important that game is for us, how important it is for all our fans, how important it is to the people in the state of Mississippi. And I'm proud of the direction the program's going in. We got to keep going in the right direction. We'll get all these. We're going to get out. We don't get a lot of time to enjoy it. Hit the road recruiting tomorrow. Get on the road, and hopefully all the kids in the state of Mississippi understand that this is where you're going to come to win championships.
For the first time since 1988, Florida Gators and the Florida State Seminoles head into their in-state matchup, both being unranked at the time of the game. Now here's Mason with more on that game.
John Brantley and the Florida Gators take on the Florida State Seminoles this past Saturday in bragging rights for the Sunshine State. Early in the first quarter, Devontae Freeman had a rushing touchdown following a turnover. Florida State went on to beat Florida 21-7 with only 95 yards offensively. The Seminoles took an early advantage of John Brantley's first half mistakes before knocking him out of the game. Mike Harris had a second quarter interception for 89 yards, took it all the way back down to the 4 before he was taken down. Shortly after, there was a TD run by Devontae Freeman. Brantley was injured with 1 minute and 45 seconds left in the second quarter. He did not return because he had concussion-like symptoms. Florida Gator backup quarterback Brissett also threw an interception to Terrence Parks for a 26-yard pick six. The Florida Gators dropped to 6-6 on the season by the hands of the Florida State Seminoles.
Another in-state rivalry, South Carolina Gamecocks, Clemson Tigers. Clemson already clinched a spot in the ACC championship game. South Carolina missing it by 1 game to Georgia in the SEC championship. Battle for an in-state rivalry. Send it over to Lemansky for more on that game.
Thank you, Hunter. The South Carolina Gamecocks defeated Clemson 34-13 in the blowout. They outrushed Clemson 210-70, and they outgained Clemson 420-153 as far as yards are concerned. Clemson tied the game at 10 in the second quarter, but South Carolina outscored Clemson 24-3 the rest of the way. The player of the game was Connor Shaw. He went 14 for 20, passing for 210 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he also rushed for 107 yards and another touchdown. And he was a major factor in the win.
In a battle for the Peach State, the Georgia Bulldogs loaded up on buses, headed to Atlanta to face the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Here's Jason Lee with more on that game.
Georgia Tech's offense sputtered here to start the game. This is the one highlight, Stephen Hill catch, and in fact the security guard even knocked him out there on the sideline. Georgia beat Georgia Tech 31-17. Georgia Tech did, however, run for 243 yards, but it was not near enough to beat the Bulldogs in this big rival game. Aaron Murray threw 4 touchdowns for the Bulldogs to lead that high-powered offense to 31 points, take out the Yellow Jackets 31-17. Again, this sets the Bulldogs up next week for the SEC Championship against the #1 team in the country, the LSU Tigers.
In an in-state rival for the state of Alabama, the traditional Iron Bowl. Alabama headed to Jordan-Hare Stadium to take on the Auburn Tigers. Much riding on this game. #2 in the country, Auburn looking to play upset. Here's Mason Donaldson with more on that one.
The Alabama Crimson Tide came into Auburn, Alabama to the Iron Bowl with high hopes. The Auburn defense was no match for Alabama's high-powered offense. Trent Richardson had 203 rushing yards against the Tigers to improve his Heisman hopes. The Auburn Tigers running back Michael Dyer, the #2 running back at the SEC, finished the game with 48 yards. A.J. McCarron had 3 first-half touchdowns, 1 pass to Brad Smelly, Alabama's tight end, who finished the game with 86 yards. Clint Mosley completed 11 of 18 passes for only 62 yards and a pick 6. The Tigers' kickoff team gave good blocks to start the second half to give McCaleb the touchdown. And this was Auburn's first score on a kick return in the Iron Bowl. Dean Milliner had a pick 6 for a 35-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter to make the game 35-14, giving Auburn no chance of coming back. Alabama finished this game off with a 42-14 victory.
And now for the battle of the Golden Boot, the LSU Tigers and the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas, #3 in the nation. LSU, #1 in the nation. Arkansas being the only team to maybe possibly knock off LSU and give Alabama a chance into the SEC championship. Here is Lemansky Flakes with more on that game.
The LSU Tigers defeated the Arkansas Razorbacks 41-17. With the win, LSU clinches the SEC West. It will be heading to Atlanta to face the Georgia Bulldogs this Saturday for the SEC title. Arkansas was leading 14-0 early in the game, but the game-changing play was a 92-yard punt return by All-American Tyrann Mathieu. LSU dominated Arkansas in all statistical categories, including first downs, where LSU had 26, Arkansas only had 11. Rush yard or total yards, LSU had 494, Arkansas only had 254. But the main stat, LSU had the ball for 37 minutes, Arkansas had the ball for 22 minutes. And the player of the game was Jordan Jefferson, as he threw for 208 yards and a touchdown. And Kenny Hilliard rushed for 102 yards and a touchdown, helping the LSU Tigers to victory.
We're going to go ahead and take it to our first break of the show. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at the current BCS standings. We'll take a look at the Heisman frontrunners. And later into the show, we'll break down the SEC championship that we played this Saturday. Welcome back to the SEC Sports Guys. Taking a look at your BCS standings. Standing atop the leader, #1 LSU, #2 Alabama, #3 Oklahoma State, #4 Stanford, #5 Virginia Tech, #6 Houston, #7 Boise State, #8 Arkansas, #9 Oregon, and #10 Oklahoma. Mentioning a few of the others in the SEC making the BCS standings, #12 South Carolina, and #14 Georgia. Let's say, guys, that LSU wins out in the SEC championship. Who deserves to play them again? Or who deserves to play them in the national championship?
Well, I think that Alabama deserves it because their body of work has been more tougher than the other teams, and they lost to the #1 team by 3 points in overtime. that's more tougher than Oklahoma State losing on the road to an unranked Iowa State, in my opinion.
Going to go along the same lines there. Since you've only got one undefeated, I think you've got to look at these one-loss teams and see who they lost to. And as he said, you got Oklahoma State, who had a terrible loss. Alabama's only loss is to the number one team in the country. Now, the other argument to that is, should a team be playing for the national championship and is not playing for their conference championship? You know, that's a point that a lot of people have made here lately. Alabama really can't help that because the team in the conference that did win is the number one team in the country. So that's something that the voters are really going to have to decide going after these conference championship games this weekend.
Mason, I'll roll over to you. What do you say to these people that might say, well, you know, Alabama's already had their shot at it? Why should they have another shot at this?
I think they should have another shot at it because their defense is one of the top defenses in the country, and they shut down LSU to only 9 points in their matchup. And just the fact that they only lost by 3 points in overtime to the number one team, I think they deserve a chance to play them again.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments on this?
Well, I think the other thing you got to look at, voters are going to look at, is who is going to give you the best game. Let's go ahead and say LSU beats Georgia this weekend in the SEC Championship. They're automatically in. So you've got those other one-loss teams. Who's going to give you the best game? If people don't like Alabama as a rematch, they may go for Oklahoma State. Well, we had that last year with Auburn and Oregon. You had a pass-happy offense going up against the SEC defense, and Auburn shut them down. And I really expect LSU to do the same thing. So if you're looking for the better game, you might want to go for Alabama-LSU.
Okay. If Alabama wasn't an option, who would we go with, Oklahoma State or Stanford? Or is there anybody else in that mix that we would look at?
It really doesn't matter because LSU is so strong and so fast defensively and offensively. They will manhandle the other opponents. And if you go with Stanford, they lost to Oregon. You go to Oklahoma State, they lost to Iowa State. And I just don't see them handling LSU in a 60-minute battle.
Okay. Well, let's throw this question in there. What if LSU loses in the SEC Championship? Throws a big wrench in this plan. Who are we looking at in the national championship game? Does LSU, with a loss coming to the SEC championship, do they deserve to go to the national championship, or do 2 other teams need to come in?
If you look at the BCS standings, LSU is an overwhelming favorite right now. You call me crazy, but I think if LSU loses, I think they're in regardless. If they lose, they're a one-loss team just like these other teams, and their one loss would be to Georgia, who's ranked number 14th. Still, in my opinion, a better loss than Oklahoma State had to Iowa State, a better loss than Stanford had to Oregon. So I would put LSU in regardless.
Okay. What about you?
I agree. LSU has had a tougher body of work, and throughout the season, LSU has solidified themselves as the number one team. There's no question asked. They are the number one team in the nation, and they deserve to play in the BCS title game.
Mason?
LSU all the way because their defense and offense just unbearable, and they're number one.
Okay. Let's move right on into the Heisman candidates here. We have a top 5 list, but it's actually we're only looking at 3. At number 1 this week, Trent Richardson. Number 2, Andrew Luck of Stanford. And number 3, Robert Griffin III of Baylor. What do you guys see? Make a statement for who do you think deserves the Heisman this year. We'll start off with you, Lumansky.
Well, I think Trent Richardson deserves the Heisman. Well, Andrew Luck is the better player. He has the better impact, will probably be drafted higher than Trent, but Trent has been going against better defenses, performed on the biggest stage, the big game against LSU. You still had a great game in that one. And Alabama has higher title chances. And the previous years, Heisman's winner has went to the title game. So that's a big factor into it.
I agree. I think you got to wait a week here. I think you got to see how these conference championships play out. Obviously, Alabama's not in it. Stanford, Andrew Luck has one more chance to kind of make a name for himself there. I think it depends on how you look at the Heisman. Is the Heisman to you, is it the MVP? Or is it the best player? That's 2 different things. MVP, I would go to Andrew Luck, because if you take him off of Stanford's team, they're no better than a 500 team. You take Trent Richardson off of Alabama, I still think they win the 11 games that they have this year. You take the Auburn game this past weekend. Richardson had 200 yards, but that's not what hurt Auburn. What hurt Auburn was the deep pass, the trick plays, the tight end over the middle. So if you go for an MVP, most valuable to their team, you go Luck. You go the best athlete, that's definitely Trent Richardson.
Yeah, Trent Richardson, in my opinion, deserves a Heisman because coming off with 600 rushing yards games and a 203 rushing yard game against Auburn last week. It's just the fact that he has so much power and stability on the run game and has blockers to block for him, he can just take it to the house.
All right. Any other comments? Robert Griffin III. We didn't even mention him.
Well,
Why don't you mention Robert Griffin III?
He's a great player. He's a great athlete. And, you know, he's a dual quarterback, can throw and run. He's very effective on both ends. But I just feel like Andrew Luck and Trent Richardson is like a two-way race between those two, and they're just way surpassed, you know, from the competition. And another point to make, Trent Richardson, he has better stats than Mark Ingram 2 years ago when he won Heisman. So that's another indicator and what to look at when you vote.
Well, as Lemanski said earlier, a lot of it comes down to teams' win-loss record. You know, Griffin plays for Baylor, who is not that high-powered offense, but as far as a team, doesn't have the record that Stanford, Alabama does. I think the other thing that hurt Griffin is he got hurt this past weekend. He got a concussion, missed the whole second half, only ended up with 100 passing yards for the game. That's going to hurt his stats when you put him up against Andrew Luck, especially quarterback versus quarterback there.
All right, we're going to go ahead and head to a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be breaking down the SEC Championship. That'll be this weekend. So we'll see you soon. Hey, welcome back to the SEC Sports Guys. Now we're going to take a look at the SEC Championship. Be played in Atlanta, Georgia, 4 o'clock on CBS this Saturday. Georgia will be making their appearance in hopes of their 13th SEC Championship, their first since 2005. LSU will be coming back looking for their 11th SEC Championship and their first since 2007. LSU has a lot on the line here, national championship hopes. Georgia just happy to be back in this game. Of course, they were looking at Mark Richt at the beginning of this season and not sure if he really needed to be the head coach there, and he's done a phenomenal job of turning things around. Started off 0-2 in the season and won the rest of them and made themselves right into the SEC Championship. I just want to go take a few minutes. I want to break down offenses and defenses of both teams. So, Lemanski, get us started. Georgia's offense.
For Georgia's offense, they have Aaron Murray as the quarterback. He leads the offense. He's a great playmaker, and he has great offensive weapons all across the board, from receivers to running backs to the offensive line. And I think they're going to host a tough challenge against the LSU Tigers.
You made a good point there. Aaron Murray, he's passed for almost 2,700 yards. He will pick that up in the SEC Championship, 32 touchdowns on the year. What I'm so impressed with, he's got 4 wide receivers that he looks to mainly, 2 of those being true freshmen. That's exciting for a young quarterback. He's only a sophomore. Great things to come at Georgia. Great offense.
Great things.
Defense. Who wants to pick up on the defense?
Georgia's defense got remarkable cornerbacks and safeties. Bakari Rambo has 7 interceptions on the year, and Jarvis Jones has 13 and a half sacks on the year. And their defense it's not the best, but then again, it's not the worst. They have some weapons, and I think they can give LSU a challenge.
All right, Jason, any other comments on Georgia, both sides of the ball?
Talk about offensively, Georgia's got wide receivers all over the place. But that's not something LSU hasn't seen all year. They saw that with Arkansas just this past week. LSU secondary has shown that they can shut down wide receivers. So what Georgia's going to have to do is they're going to have to look for that tight end, Orson Charles. He leads the team in receptions. That's going to be the key. If you watch that Alabama-Auburn game, Auburn keyed on the running game. Auburn keyed on the wide receivers. The tight end is what hurt them. And I think that's what Georgia's going to have to go to with all the speed LSU has. You're going to have to run the tight end across the middle, looking for a pattern there.
Okay. Let's move over to LSU, looking at LSU's offense. I'll go ahead and take it right back with you again. Tell us a little bit about LSU's offense.
LSU's offense, at the beginning of the year, they had 2 quarterback system with Jordan Jefferson and Jarrett Lee. They've settled on Jefferson now. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can beat you with his legs. He can beat you with his arm. And that's what's been impressive the last couple of weeks is he has been throwing the ball down the field. He's had numerous completions, shown that he can throw all the routes, deep, long, short, whatever, and he has done a good job stepping up. Georgia's really going to have to contain him and keep him inside the box. Don't let him run.
All right, talk to us a little bit about LSU's running backs. They're so different than other teams running multiple running backs. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, they're very deep with the running back system, and they're probably the most deepest team as far as running backs go in the whole nation. And their running game has been a spark to their offense. Like, ever since that Alabama game where they scored 9 points, they have been averaging 45 points the last 3 games. So LSU has quietly turned into an offensive juggernaut over the last 3 games with the quarterback switch and the running backs running their routes and the following their blocks and the holes and stuff.
All right, good. Let's move over to the LSU defensive side of the ball. Mason, tell us a little bit about that.
LSU defense is probably the second best defense behind Alabama. One, because Tyrann Mathieu and Morris Claiborne. The defensive backs of this team, they're remarkable. They have great coverage, and they blitz all the time, and just
You're right. You talked about Mathieu. He's an exciting player to watch, whether it be special teams or on defense. He seems to make plays happen. So you're definitely right on that. Tell us a little bit more on that defensive side.
Well, LSU defensively is going to have to stop the run. You got Isaiah Crowell, a very good running back. You know that Andrew Murray is going to get his passing yards, and that's fine. LSU secondary has shown that they can stop a high-profile quarterback. What it's going to come down to is the linebackers. Can they stop the run, and can they get pressure on Murray? If you get pressure on Murray, I think you're going to have a very good night.
All right, prediction time. Lemansky, how do you see this one?
Well, given the fact that LSU has been on the hot streak as far as scoring, and given the fact that their performance from last week's game against Arkansas, the third-ranked team in the entire nation, I have LSU scoring 34 and Georgia scoring 17. Now, LSU is a great team. They have a lot to play for, BCS title aspirations, and Les Miles being the great motivator that he is, he's not going to let his team slip up last game before a potential title game. So that's why I think they're going to send a message. They're going to score a touchdown late, and it's going to be 34-17 final score.
I think you're going to see a lot of nerves early. I think both teams are going to come out like they are playing for that national championship. I've got a little bit lower score. I am going to go with LSU. However, before I give the score, I will say LSU better not keep Georgia in the game. Do not let Georgia stay in the game. With it being in Atlanta, right outside of Athens, Georgia's going to have the crowd. Georgia's going to have the underdog mentality coming in. I think LSU prevails. I'm going to go 17-14, a little bit lower score.
Wow. Okay.
yeah, I'm going LSU too. One, mainly because their defense. Their defense has shut down every team this year, and their lowest score is 6 points. And I think they can just pull it off. And
Okay. Any score predictions?
score prediction, I would say 27-10.
27-10 LSU. I just think that LSU is going to be too much for them. I do think that they're going to, you said that nerves will play a factor. I think LSU is going to come in and they're going to own it from the first play of the game. They've got too much on the line here. They've worked too hard this season. Not taking anything away from Georgia. They've had a great season as well. But what I like most about LSU is they have been challenged this season. They've played those top teams. Georgia can't help it that they're playing in the SEC, and it's been weak in the Eastern Division, and they can't help that. But, early on they lost to South Carolina, who came in second for the East, and then they lost to Boise State to start the season. Now, they did go on to win the rest of those games, but the opponents were not as strong as LSU faced this season. LSU's proved it over and over again, and many times they've taken out teams very easily, with the exception of Alabama in the overtime win. I just think LSU is going to be too much for them. I've got LSU by at least 17. So, thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoy the SEC Championship this Saturday. Again, that's 4 o'clock on CBS. And we'll see you next time.